Hey everybody, welcome to Fantasy R&R. This is your host Ryan.
And I'm Rob.
And this is our Week 14 preview.
This is Fantasy with Rob and Ryan. Fa la 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 fantasy football.
Playoffs are looming, most players are not booming, and there are 4 teams on a bye this week. Are you thin on options? We're going to help you out with some possible deep sleeper waiver pickups to help you stream your way into a last-minute playoff spot. Let's get started with the Thursday night matchup.
Steelers at Vikings.
Tyler Conklin at tight end. 7 catches on 9 targets last week after Thielen left that game. And much like Kirk Cousins, he seems to float around on the waiver wire at 43% owned despite a very competent passing game in Minnesota. He's actually one of the top tight ends left that isn't on people's radars for some reason. So if you got to choose between him or someone like CJ Uzomah, I think Tyler Conklin is the clear person you take. Go ahead and stream him if you really need somebody in that tight end or flex spot with all these buys.
Yeah, and I'm sticking with the same team here. I'm going with the Vikings, but I'm going KJ Osborne. I believe KJ Osborne could fit in very nice to Adam Thielen's cleats, if you will. He has had already this year 4 games of over 10 fantasy points per game, and believe it or not, those 4 games were the most times he was targeted, including just last week where he went 4 receptions, 47 yards, and a touchdown. I believe he's going to see a lot of targets this week against a pretty porous Steelers secondary.
Falcons at Panthers.
Are you low on your QB options? I think Cam Newton is going to bounce back against his second worst team against QBs right now in the league for fantasy purposes. Newton's only 36% owned. I think some people got scared off. Week 12, we saw him have 3 total touchdowns. Week 13, he's a bust with 5 completed passes out of 21 attempts. Actually gets yanked for PJ Walker at the end of that. As other options on the waiver include Tannehill or Heinecke right now, you're probably looking at those guys. Cam Newton is a solid play for this particular game against the Falcons, who are really bad against the pass. Cam Newton, with his legs, should be able to put up a 10-point floor.
Russell Gage? Again? Maybe? ? We've seen this before, but someone has to be grabbing more balls, than just Kyle Pitts on this Falcons team. We saw Gage have a really great Week 13 against Tampa, 11 receptions, 130 yards. He has had back-to-back weeks of over 15 points. This could possibly be a trend. I don't know. He could also put up a donut like he did in Week 10. It all depends if Matty Ice is going to be able to throw a football against Carolina this week.
Ravens at Browns.
Sammy Watkins is actually going to be somewhat of a streaming option right now. Again, this is desperation. We're about to get into the playoffs for most of these. Some people are just depending on their team to win this week, and it's rough with all these teams on buys because your starting roster is going to be stretched thin. Sammy Watkins usually blows up at the beginning of the season and then does nothing at the end of the season. This year, he didn't even blow up at the beginning of the season. But with 11 targets and a TD in the last 3 games, and Rashad Bateman putting up that terrible donut, looking like he's going to be devalued in the passing game for the Ravens, at 8.1% rostered in ESPN, Sammy Watkins could be a streaming option for you at Flex too.
Yeah, I believe this is going to be an absolute shootout of a game, so I'm going to receiver, except on the opposite side. My man, Donovan Peoples-Jones has got to get going. Baker's got to be able to throw to this guy. The best that Baker has looked all season long is when he throws to DPJ, so I'm kind of hoping that trend continues. I know he's had some injury problems throughout the season, but Donovan Peoples-Jones has been able to prove to be a long reception away from putting up a very nice fantasy score for you. So go look at him Week 14 if you're in need of help.
Seahawks at Texans.
Gerald Everett is still only 10% rostered, mostly due to Russell Wilson's struggles and Gerald Everett's recent fumbles in the last game. But worth noting, he's got 19 targets in 3 games in a very favorable matchup against the Houston Texans, who are an absolute mess this year. Look for Russell Wilson to bounce back now that his hand is probably fully healed, and Gerald Everett, who did have one of those late touchdowns in the last couple of weeks, I think Russell Wilson's be able to get the ball to him, and it's going to be a good streaming option for Week 14.
Yeah, and for me, this is an absolute crapshoot. I'm going Rashad Penny. Why not? The Seattle running back situation has been a complete mess all season long. You never know who's going to get the ball, but Penny did look pretty good last week against San Francisco, and this Texans run defense is horrendous. So if somebody's going to score a touchdown, I'm going Rashad Penny. Why not? I'm not saying start him with confidence or anything, but if you're in need of a flex, penny could be worth his weight in copper.
Raiders at Chiefs.
Daryl Williams is still not owned in 35% of ESPN leagues right now, which is kind of amazing. We've seen it before with other teams like the Vikings with Madison and Cook, or what I'll talk about later, Montgomery, Khalil Herbert on the Bears. Daryl Williams should be handcuffed by most people just for CEH, and he continues to be involved even with CEH back. He can be a solid mid-floor flex too right now against the Raiders. Most of the time he's going to do his work in the passing game, but that's perfect for PPR formats. Daryl Williams is still out there on a lot of waiver wires and could save some people in their flex spots to get them into the playoffs this week.
Yeah, I think if the Raiders are going to be able to have a chance at winning this game, it's going to be on the shoulders of Derek Carr. He's going to have to be able to throw the ball early and often throughout this game against a team who can essentially score at will. Kansas City's defense has been, a little hit or miss all season long. And Derek Carr in Week 10 against Kansas City did put up 261 yards through the air with 2 touchdowns and an interception. But he's done it once before. This game being in Kansas City might be a little different. But I'm going Derek Carr if you need some of a nice flyer at the quarterback position.
Saints at Jets.
With all the bye weeks and the news that people like Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are going to be out, there's a lot of people who are stretched thin at wide receiver right now. Quan Smith is only 12.5% owned in ESPN leagues. But New Orleans doesn't have many options to begin with. With a pair of TDs on the year and 20 targets in the last 3 games, Saquon Smith is probably the perfect dice roll option against a New York Jets secondary that gives up tons of points to every offense over the course of the year. You can't bet on him for gold, but if the next guy we're going to talk about is on his game, Saquon Smith is going to be your man to stream.
Yeah, and I'm going with the guy who is going to be throwing to Saquon Smith, Taysom Hill. Last week didn't look all that great or anything, did throw the 4 picks, but including the 4 picks, he did carry the ball 11 times for 101 yards. I get it. He's a quarterback. He doesn't need to be rushing all the time, but did throw for 264 yards. This week, he gets to face the Jets, who we all know is a really, really bad team. So it'll be very interesting to see if Taysom Hill will be able to reclamate his season so far later into this season.
Jaguars at Titans.
Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. Don't know who that is? Most people fucking don't feel bad about it. But he's been the top target in Tennessee since Julio's been gone. Julio Jones just returned to limited practices. They have about a 21-day window to decide whether they're going to put him on the active roster, but he is designated to return from IR. And A.J. Brown out on the IR right now. 2% owned is Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, but that's probably expected to rise this weekend as he is expected to become a waiver darling by Sunday with all of this news coming out that Julio Jones may not actually play. So there's got to be someone to throw the ball to, much like Rob always says, and this guy is going to be your boom or bust play. Desperation as you're trying to get into the playoffs.
It's always fun every week to see what quarterback is throwing against the Jacksonville Jaguars defense, and this week it's Ryan Tannehill. So I don't know, worth a shot, right? As you were saying, Julio Jones is coming back. It might be worth a shot if you're in that dire need of a quarterback situation. I still like Derek Carr more than I do like Tannehill, but you can never, ever, ever worry about a Jacksonville Jaguars defense, let alone their offense, which continuously just gets off the field very quick. I think Tannehill has a really good shot throwing a couple touchdowns this week.
Cowboys at Washington football team.
Taylor Heinecke with a 7-2 touchdown to interception ratio and respectable yardage numbers the entire season, while still being available in 72% of leagues, is the perfect fill-in for teams with Ertz, Tua, or Wentz on buys and no other options at QB. If you can't get a hold of Cam Newton or Ryan Tannehill like we talked about, and Taysom Hill, who I think most people jumped on the bandwagon last week, then Taylor Heinecke is going to be your guy. I'm streaming him this week with Ertz and Tua out, and I expect him to have a decent game against the Cowboys. Heinecke, while he's not a gigantic, high-ceiling kind of quarterback, he's been completely respectable throughout the year, and I have no problem expecting 15 points from him from this matchup.
Yeah, I'm going with the football team here myself. I'm going Ricky Seals-Jones, the backup tight end to Logan Thomas, who looks like he is done for the season. I like Heinecke with the dink and doink, and he tends to go tight ends heavily in the red zone. We've seen that with Logan Thomas all season long. as well as when Ricky Seals-Jones has played. So it'll be interesting. If you need a tight end or a maybe a sneaky little flex position, Cowboys defense has been kind of hit or miss all season. So I am looking there at Seals-Jones this week, week 14.
Lions at Broncos.
Josh Reynolds is emerging as a top option in this limited offense. If you're looking for a fill-in in your flex 2 position, then Josh Reynolds is a possibility because he's only 2.3% owned in the ESPN league, so he's going to be available out there on the waiver wires, but he's got 12 targets in the last 2 games. As bad as the Lions are, the Broncos have been underwhelming against the pass from what I expected at the beginning of the season, and Jared Goff, who's kind of on a tear the last couple games, I think he's starting to find some rhythm even with this bad team, and Josh Reynolds is going to be one of his top targets. So again, if you're desperate right now for that flex 2, start Josh Reynolds this week.
If you have Melvin Gordon on your team and you don't have Javonte Williams as his handcuff, I think you are doing something wrong this year, because I do believe that Javonte Williams is the better running back. And that might not be earth-shattering news or anything to anybody, but last week we clearly saw it. 23 carries, 102 yards, 6 receptions, 76 yards, and a partridge in a pear tree. I'm just kidding, a touchdown. This was with Melvin Gordon not playing at all last week. If he doesn't end up having to play this week as well, I think Javonte Williams is going to be an absolute fantasy stud for years to come, and we are just now seeing the beginning of his birth.
Giants at Chargers.
Chargers are an interesting situation. If Keenan Allen misses time due to the COVID positive test and he can't produce enough negative tests in time to play, Jalen Guyton could be your man. And that's definitely if Mike Williams also misses time, who was in close contact with Keenan Allen. Guyton is coming off a 4 for 90 for 1 performance with an on-fire Justin Herbert at the helm against the New York Giants. He will quickly fly off the waivers as the injury report becomes clear this weekend. So my advice is see if you can snag him right now before that injury report comes out, because Jalen Guyton's going to be a good option to stream.
I'm going with some guy named Saquon Barkley. I know, right? You drafted this guy in the first round, and he hasn't scored a touchdown since week 4. Absolutely insane. Well, I think fast forward 10 weeks later, he's going to do it this week. You know, I think a lot of people at this point are second guessing whether or not you're playing him. Look, you drafted him in week 1, in round 1 for a reason. You're trying to get in the playoffs. You got to play this guy. He's playing against a Chargers defense who has given up the second most rushing touchdowns to running backs, only behind the Jets. So that says something. I'm calling it now. Barkley is going to have at least a touchdown in week 14.
49ers at Bengals.
I think the Bengals defense special teams is a possible boom stream this week against a struggling San Francisco pass and inconsistent run attack. You hear that? That's the ambulance for Jimmy Garoppolo, because the dude is fucking dying out there. They have 4 picks, 4 fumble recoveries, 9 sacks, and a touchdown in the last 3 matchups, and they're only 12% rostered in ESPN, mostly due to low projections by multiple fantasy apps. The Bengals D is definitely an option right now if you're a little concerned about who you currently have in that slot.
Another week, another San Francisco running back. That's right, folks. Michael Hasty is back on the waivers and is looking at a decently promising week with the possible injuries to Elijah Mitchell, Jeff Wilson, and Deebo Samuel. Hasty might be the guy in San Francisco. I'm not saying start the guy or anything, but if you're in need of a running back, a flex play, he could be a sneaky little get for week 14.
Bills at Buccaneers.
Gabriel Davis is a complete desperation option. I get that. But just to throw some numbers out there, 25 targets, over 200 yards, 2 TDs, and a 100-yard game in that stretch of 6 games. He will be a touchdown-dependent stream, but a viable one, considering the quarterback who will be throwing to him, Josh Allen. The Bills always come to play. They've been on a little bit of a slump. I think it's time that they're going to bounce back. They are going up against a tough defense, but with Tom Brady, who's obviously going to kind of torch this defense right now with the way they've been playing, Josh Allen is going to be looking to answer every time, and he's not always going to be able to throw to Stephon Diggs. So Gabriel Davis is out there on the waiver wires right now. If you have nobody else to get you to the playoffs, this is one dude you might want to consider as a boom or bust.
And I don't know why, but I feel like this is going to be one of those Cameron Brate games where, like, the Bills defense is going to be so focused on the talent elsewhere on the field that Cameron Brate will come out on top of any receiver or running back or even Gronkowski. This is more of an LOL moment, if you will, but Cameron Brate, I hope you have yourself a great game against the Bills defense that needs desperately to win.
Bears at Packers.
You remember that guy, Khalil Herbert? Well, keep your eye on the injury report this week, as he will be the workhorse fill-in for David Montgomery, who did not practice yesterday due to multiple injuries that he's dealing with, groin and otherwise. Seems owners have still not learned their lesson about handcuffing running backs, as Herbert is rostered in less than 20% of ESPN leagues right now, most of probably which are Montgomery owners themselves, who are hesitant to drop Herbert after the injuries earlier in the season. This is one of those situations where, people in Yahoo, they'll be in the chat section like, is it time to cut ties, or thank you for your service? These are the reason that these guys aren't getting into the playoffs, or they're not getting very far. Khalil Herbert is probably going to be a good ad right now at the beginning of the weekend before that injury report comes out.
I'm going Packers defense on this. Packers D has been pretty solid all season long, and they're playing pretty porous Bears offense, even with the potential return of Justin Fields, who hasn't played, I believe, in a couple weeks. It could be shaking off some rust, and the Packers offense, we know, is just going to tear up that Bears defense. So I'm going Packers D. I think it's kind of a sneaky ad if you have like Arizona or Buffalo's D, who have pretty tough matchups this week. Maybe you want to try to stream a defense. I like Green Bay against the Bears in Week 14.
Rams at Cardinals.
With almost all of the Rams being heavily rostered amongst all leagues, and a potential shootout game looming in this Monday night matchup, I think Christian Kirk is being dropped to the waivers due to a lack of production while fighting for targets with DeAndre Hopkins back in action. He's only 53% rostered, but he's with one of the best offenses in the league right now and with one of the best quarterbacks in the league when healthy. So this is going to be leaving you a last-minute boom or bust play that saw 5 weeks of 13 or more fantasy points a game from Christian Kirk. So you got to pray, but this is an option.
Yeah, I'm going Zach Ertz in this game, and the reason is I realized that he is unowned in 38% of ESPN leagues, which I just find insane, especially with the Arizona offense being as good as it has been, and Kyler Murray is back under center. I think this is going to end up being a shootout game, of course. It's very important for the division. The Cardinals are going to want to stay on top. And I believe that Zach Ertz could see some targets, early and often, especially in the red zone, where he seems to do a lot of his catches. I know last week was a dud, but we all know in fantasy, those duds tend to be on the heels of a very solid game the week after. Go look at Zach Ertz, especially if he's on that waiver wire.
And that's going to do it for our Week 14 preview. All of the best useless fantasy news you could possibly be getting in one channel. This was Fantasy R&R with Rob and Ryan. We'll see you next time.
That was Fantasy with Rob and Ryan. Fantasy R&R.
Keep the change, you filthy animal.